I sense a great disturbance in the Force.
Always remember I am fear. Always remember I am hunter. Always remember I am filth. Always remember I am nothing. I've just one final taste. Destroy your ties to the Jedi, and at last you will be a Sith Lord. Will destroy the Sith and the Jedi.
Vader can't stop me now. Nothing can. Nothing can. Nothing can.
Yes, joining us on the line right now, the one, the only, Mr. Sam Witwer.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys.
It's an absolute pleasure. And listening to that introduction, it's a great reminder to fans that are listening of just how prolific you are and have been in the Star Wars universe. But you know, I guess when they need a really evil character, Dave Filoni and company, they just call up Sam Witwer. So what is it, Sam, about you that enables you to play such great bad guys?
Well, I think it's just because I'm a murderer. I think the murderer thing is. I think that helps. No, I don't know. I mean, aside from Starkiller, it's been baddies.
Well, it depends on how you play the game, because Starkiller can be a pretty bad guy too.
This is true. Yeah. But Dave Filoni, I mean, one job led into the next. The Force Unleashed led to him hiring me and Adrian Wilkinson for the Mortis trilogy, and then that led to Darth Maul. So, you know, and who knows where that's going to go next, aside from more Darth Maul, of course.
Awesome. And Sam, how does that make you feel? Because you grew up as a kid in fabulous Glenview, Illinois, as a Star Wars fan. And the reason I make reference to Sam growing up in Glenview, Illinois, is because that's pretty much the same area I grew up in. I grew up in the town Northbrook. And I want to ask you a little bit more about what it was like growing up a Star Wars fan in Glenview later on. But I just want to know, how does it feel being such a Star Wars fan and having Jason now refer to you as a prolific Star Wars actor?
Well, I got to say, it's really, I mean, it's as fun as you would think. I mean, it really is. It's one of those things where if you could go back in time and tell yourself at 10 years old that you would have the opportunity to contribute to that mythology. I mean, you know, your 10-year-old self would flip you off and kick you in the balls or something. I mean, it would have been honestly, I wouldn't have believed myself. But yeah, it's really a good time, and it's also an opportunity to try out ideas that I've had for a long time. You know, such things that I talked with friends about when I was a teenager, and now I get to kind of slip them into these Star Wars projects. So I'm really lucky. I'm really having a good time.
And the idea of Darth Maul being found at the bottom of a garbage pit, completely insane. Did that come from the script or from Filoni or from your ad-libbing, or is it a combination of the three?
Oh, well, as far as the overall shape of the story, that has to be, they have to know exactly what they're doing before we get into the recording room. You know, it's not like we all just get together and, you know, and we're all sitting there and I arrived there and I'm like, hey, I was thinking, what if he was like a spider? And they're like, yeah, he's a spider.
Oh, you've ruined it. See, that's how I think that it happens.
Yeah.
The reason I bring up the question about your ad-libs and your contributions to the story in particular is because it seems like your talents as portraying Maul as insane was something that was probably exploited a little bit in the voiceover booth, because we saw those great behind-the-scenes videos on StarWars.com.
And definitely, I mean, you know, again, they have some, the way they do it is they have like layout. They've already, quote unquote, sort of shot the scene with, you know, sort of very primitive versions of the characters, maybe with temp dialogue, and they have a general idea of what they want. But then they go into the recording booth and they get the actual performances, and then those ideas get fleshed out in a big way in terms of what the specifics are and what the specific performances are and all that stuff. And sometimes the layout will change based on what happens with the performance. In the case of Darth Maul, I think there was a lot more, because you talk about the ad-libs, and where those came in was that the script said that he was muttering to himself, and but it didn't specify what he was saying. I mean, sometimes the script would have a word over and over and over again, so I would just kind of expand off whatever the idea of that word was, and I just ad-libbed a bunch of stuff. I mean, it was a little bit like, because I thought this was kind of a Heart of Darkness reference, that this guy has to go find, like Apocalypse Now, he has to find Colonel Kurtz, and so very much like that, I was in the vocal booth ad-libbing a lot of twisted stuff, and they used quite a bit of it. I was very happy about that, including bits of the Sith Code, or also even perverted bits of the Sith Code that weren't quite right, and because I thought, here's an opportunity to give the audience hints about what this guy's last 13 years were like. What is, what are the ideas and the thoughts and the mantras that he's used to try to keep himself alive and keep himself together, unsuccessfully.
One of those thoughts is a line that Darth Maul said that particularly caught my attention. I'm going to play the piece of audio for you. Here it is.
The chains are the easy part. It's what goes on in here that's hard.
Wow, listen to that. And so that line is a line that you performed as the Son in his guise as a prison creature in the episode Altar of Mortis. Here's that sound.
The chains are the easy part. It's what goes on in here that's hard.
So my crazy speculation led me to believe that there's a possibility that we're not actually seeing Darth Maul, but we're seeing the Son disguised as Darth Maul. Now, I know that's really off the deep end, but maybe you can just kind of tell me what your motivation was for picking that particular piece of dialogue and applying it to the character of Darth Maul.
Well, here's the thing. I mean, I could tell you exactly what I think it means, but then I'm robbing you of the fun of your imagination. I mean, you tell me what you think it means. I have very specific. Everything that I did had very specific reasons, and if you listen very carefully to what Darth Maul is saying, even in the background while Clancy's talking, or there are it's not gibberish. There are very specific things that he's saying, and in some cases he's talking to specific people, and if you can make it out, you get little clues as to what's going on with him. But I don't know that I want to explain it. I think it's more fun if, I mean, yeah. Look, I think the Son, okay, Dave likes to not go into the specifics of what all the Mortis stuff means, right? And I think he's right to do that. But I don't think there's any secret in saying that the Son was made to represent all of the villains of the Star Wars universe. I mean, he was. There are little in my performance as the Son. I tried to give little hints of Palpatine and hints of Darth Vader and hints of Darth Maul and Dooku and all those guys, and but to do it very subtly, not to hit you over the head with it. And or I mean, sometimes I did hit you over the head with it, but other times were a little bit more subtle. So, in terms of the connection between those two characters, it's up to you guys. I know what I think it is, and I know what I think the connection is, or how that all works. But it's it's more interesting for you guys to figure it out. It's the same thing with, for example, everyone who wants to know, hey, but how did he survive, and what's the story of the past 13 years? And I think Star Wars fans, we have with the expanded universe, everyone is used to having every little piece of Star Wars history explained. If there's a guy in the corner drinking a whiskey, Star Wars has a whole story for what is he doing in the Mos Eisley of the Cantina, and that's cool. And I definitely read a lot of that stuff when I was younger. But on the other hand, what's really cool is figuring it out yourself. I mean, when we watched those original 3 movies and that's all we had, our imagination filled in a lot of gaps. And I would love to bring that back to Star Wars. I mean, what was Darth Maul doing for the past 13 years? How did he survive? Well, I happen to know the answers to those questions, but I actually think it's more fun if people kind of come up with it. I've heard people come up with theories that I'm like, yeah, I think that's you're on the right track there. I think it's pretty straightforward. I mean, in terms of the direct survival. We've seen characters force users fall into bottomless pits before, and what happens sometimes? Well, don't they get sucked into waste removal tubes? I don't know. I mean, haven't we seen that? It's just something to kind of get you going. I mean, it's when I got the script, I didn't have those questions. I read it and I was like, oh, this is all totally clear to me. But I guess it's not, maybe it's not clear to everyone. I don't know. But for me, I was like, oh yeah, then this happened, and this happened, and this happened, and I asked Dave about some of those things, and he's like, yeah, that's the idea. One of the interesting things that I will demystify, though, because frankly, okay, people can come up with whatever they want, but I think this is cooler if they know actually what it is. That isn't a droid that he's on top of, that whole spider thing. That's not a droid. I think it's more cool if you really watch, for example, the HD broadcast and take a good close look at those legs. It's very clear what's happening there, or what's been happening over the past 13 years, how that's evolved.
What you were alluding to is in your live chat you did with Entertainment Weekly, and I think you also made reference to this in your Star Wars Insider interview, is that spider legs weren't actually surgically attached to him.
No, not at all.
A manifestation of the dark side energies coming together and forming the lower half of his body in such a hideous way that it looked like a spider.
Well, it's funny, Dave, now that I think about it, there's no reason to be cagey about this because Dave actually answered this at the Q&A for the screening. If you look closely at those legs, you can see pieces of the legs swimming around the surface of the legs, and you can also see pieces that are floating off of the legs. So it's if you look closely, there's no ambiguity there. This is a manifestation of the dark side of the Force. This isn't a droid thing. Some of the pieces are obviously of droids, the pieces of garbage, but the idea is that he'd been crawling around in the garbage, and as he started losing his sanity, the dark side starts stretching out and kind of trying to protect himself, and then suddenly pieces of garbage started sticking to him, and then they over the years kind of grew into these spider legs so that he could get around, which I think is of course they grew with his madness. It's a complete physical manifestation of his mental state, and I just think that's awesome. And again, it's one of those things where when I read the script, that was immediately my take. I'm like, oh well, actually, you know what? I shouldn't take all the credit for that because Dave explained it to me when he offered me the job. He said, yeah, he's through the dark side of the Force. These spider legs have grown out of him, made of garbage, and I just love that. I think it's amazing.
Sam, when we think of Darth Maul, we think of him as we last saw him in episode 1, and he's obviously played by Ray Park. He's big. He's bad. When you actually go into the studio to record, you don't have the liberty or the luxury of seeing the episode. How privy were you to what Maul was going to look like that would have clued you in to just how vulnerable he was and how that informed your performance?
Well, that was the thing is they brought the artwork. Dave, when he called me up to offer me the role, we talked about it because he wanted me to start thinking about it in the weeks leading up to the record, and which by the way I got to thank him for that. I mean, one of the things I love about Dave Filoni is he understands actors well enough to know that the more information you give us, the better. And for example, when we were recording the stuff, he set me up with a lot of scripts ahead of time, stuff that was way in the future in terms of where this character was going. So I had the liberty and the opportunity to create an arc, to have it start in a very specific place so that it could continue to evolve for many episodes down into the future. And me and him had talks on the phone of like, okay, as I understand it, the story starts here, and then it goes here, and it goes here, and we keep revealing new character traits and new motivations, and so it's very wise of him to understand my job well enough to know that he has to get me those scripts,
Yeah, right.
Which is great. If he wants it to be really good, then he's got to give me the opportunity to do that and build a very definitive arc and deliberate arc. But What was your question? What am I talking about? Where are we? Who am I?
I was just talking about how much the way that Maul looks, the concept and how it informed your performance. Because we see him, he's not just got spider legs, he's emaciated, he's awfully thin, his horns have all grown out, and he's unkempt. I guess that's like the Zabrak equivalent of having a bad hair day or whatever.
Yeah, well, the thing is, every time that Maul has come back in the expanded universe, people. He's back because he's badass. You can't take this guy. He's badass. And it's like, that wasn't, I don't think that was, look, not to undercut any of those stories, like what was it, the Infinities, or what was the line?
Yeah, right, the Infinities, right, yeah.
In the desert, and attacks Obi-Wan.
Right, and he gets popped by Uncle Owen.
One of the cooler things that Obi-Wan, bursts out of the sand, which is something you've never really seen. I mean, so there are great ideas there.
Yeah.
But they only really had the movie to work off of, right? And the movie has him, at last we reveal ourselves to the Jedi, that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all. And Ray Park's amazing performance. And by the way, Peter Serafinowicz really created a brilliant starting point for that character vocally. But if you cut the guy in half, I'm sorry, it's just a terrible story if he comes back saying, "Hey, here I am,"
Right.
I'm back, and I've been waiting for 12 years. That's a terrible story. That's actually bad storytelling. Mm-hmm. The story of Star Wars is always has these examples of the dark side of the Force taking more than it gives you, and that the consequences for being a disciple of the dark side are always extraordinarily grim. And so, so this idea of, like, first of all, we have to explain his absence. And secondly, we have to, the spider thing, the thing I thought was so beautiful about it was it's like, great, this is actually the first time in Star Wars, aside from the Emperor's particular stamp on it, this is the first time that we're really staring into the dark side. And there is no force of will that is strong enough to filter that for us. We're staring at the literal truth of the dark side, which is madness and despair and grief and suffering. That's what it is. Because when you're that selfish, when you're that self-absorbed, this is the ultimate consequence. You become obsessed, and in his case, he's become obsessed with himself, and he's been consumed with what he's afraid of. And one of the things that the Sith are always afraid of is dying. Why doesn't Vader do something? He's living this terrible life. So you think he would have made a move on the Emperor, and he tries these different things, but why doesn't he just be a little bit more bold about it? Because at least if he dies, that's some form of release. Well, no, because he's afraid of that, and he's afraid of the Emperor, and he's afraid of death. And because if you die, then you can't get any more things. You can't receive things. You can't accumulate. And so this all made perfect sense to me. I'm like, this is the consequence for following that you cease to live in a real world because you're not really paying attention to the people that are around you, and you're not living in a world where other people's feedback means anything to you. You're living in a world that's completely about yourself, and that is a definition of insanity. To live in a world where you are so single-mindedly about yourself that you're not playing by anyone else's rules. Or rules that are even healthy for yourself. I know I'm getting super.
No, that's what we do. We should have had Sam on the round table. We could have used you earlier.
But this is these were when I read the script, I was just like, this is absolutely right. This is the only way you can bring back the character. And also because the fans have such expectations, you do need to wipe those expectations clean with doing something that they don't expect, and then. Only then have they earned getting the character back that they expected and having him go off and fight a cool lightsaber fight. But you do have to earn that, Mm-hmm. And furthermore, the Darth Maul that we see in the second episode, Revenge, he isn't quite on his game just yet. In fact, it'll be a little bit before we see him back on his game. But when he gets on his game, that's when he's at his absolute most dangerous. And that's when it gets really exciting, because this is the thing that people haven't, things that people have overlooked about this character is that he would have to be smart. He'd have to be near genius level, because look, the Sith, there's only two, right? You get an apprentice, And, yeah, there's theories that, Anakin was always the target even before he was born and blah, blah, blah. But the Sith, my personal belief is that they're more competitive than that. That Palpatine would be like, I'm gonna do my best with this apprentice. And yes, I got this other thing waiting in the wings if this doesn't work out. And in fact, I'll have them fight each other if just to prove to me who's the better apprentice. I mean, this is part of the recruitment process.
Right.
And so one can, one has to believe that Palpatine trained this guy as well as he could have and got the best guy he could. So it couldn't be just, he's a really good fighter, so he's going to be my apprentice. No, he would have to be brilliantly intelligent. He would have to have learned something from his master in terms of his political acumen and his ability to think strategically and tactically. And he'd have to be he'd have to have been someone who could have worked out in the Clone Wars very well for Palpatine. I mean, the way that I looked at it is that he was supposed to be a cross between General Grievous and Count Dooku. That, perhaps he would have assembled, there would have been a puppet guy involved, in charge of the Separatists, but Darth Maul really would have been running the show. And,
yeah, there's the great line where he says, the Clone Wars began without me.
Yeah.
Where he feels like he
by the way, what I say about what his function would have been, that is more my theory, but it is a theory based on what we see him do the next few times that we see him in the show. Because he starts putting together some plans, and you're kind of like, well, you seem like you've been trained for this. You seem like you know what you're doing.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe not at first, but because he's not perfect and he makes some mistakes, but eventually you learn that this guy is effective. And again, I thought that made perfect sense. It doesn't make sense that Darth Maul would have just been this silent assassin. And while that's cool, kind of like Boba Fett, it doesn't make sense for a Sith apprentice at all. Because this guy would have to at least have the ability. You couldn't be a Sith apprentice unless your master was like, this guy has the potential to become more powerful than me and eventually kill me, so that the Sith continue to remain strong. I mean, hell, Palpatine says that about Vader. He says that to Yoda, that Darth Vader will become more powerful than either of us. That's what he really wants. He wants someone who will at some point surpass him and forcibly take his power from him, to take the influence, to eventually take over the Empire and make sure the Sith are strong. So you don't hire an apprentice who's stupid,
Right.
or just not that sharp. I mean, having said that, Darth Maul doesn't have to say a lot to get what he wants. He is at times in our stories a man of very few words, but what's wonderful about him is that you can see him thinking and plotting and planning and scanning the room and figuring out who are we talking to and how do we maneuver this to our advantage, especially when he has Savage backing him up. Anyway, I've just talked there for a very long period of time.
No, it's all right.
Yeah,
no, it's all right.
Really, I really think you need to think a little bit more about this character and try to understand his motivations a little bit better. No, really, this is really great stuff here. It's fantastic insight to a character who's remained mostly a mystery, mostly an enigma for years and years. And you're really bringing something of your own spin to him, to the table. Have you heard from the original voice, Peter Serafinowicz? Has he watched either of the episodes that you're aware of?
No, I haven't. I hope that he sees it at some point and approves of what I've done. But I mean, on the other hand, I don't know if that's, I don't know how he would feel about that. I've talked to his buddy Simon Pegg, though, who really liked him. He really liked the episodes. He said some very kind things. Which, again, I don't know if that's the same thing as getting Serafinowicz's buy-in, but
well, I mean, if Simon Pegg is complimenting anything going on in the prequel era, then you scored a home run. So good on you there.
Yeah,
certainly,
he was very kind.
That's great.
Simon's a very intelligent, opinionated guy, especially when it comes to Star Wars. So he obviously, he didn't like everything in the episodes, but overall, he said the key thing about these episodes is it certainly makes me want to see more. So right. I thought that was
there you go. You've done your job, right?
Yeah, well, that's the point, right?
Right.
If it's entertaining and it gives someone something to think about, then sure, yeah, then tune in next week, right? That's That's the business, right?
Right. Sam, you kept talking about, the nature of the Sith and the relationship between the master and the apprentice. I mean, you know a little bit about this, having played a pretty complex character in The Force Unleashed, Vader's secret apprentice. How much of the study that you did in playing that character were you able to kind of bring to Darth Maul? Do you see a cohesive Sith philosophy from project to project that you're working on with Star Wars?
Oh, it's funny that you should say that, because when we were doing Force Unleashed, I when you're developing a character, you're trying to figure out what are the different sides of this character, because you want to make a three-dimensional guy, a guy who, when he talks to his friends, talks in a certain way, and when he talks to these people, he talks a certain way and has these different opinions about things, and you're trying to break him down into several different levels. By the way, like, little side note, this is completely neither here nor there, but the guy, Michael Ironside was doing an interview for the character in Splinter Cell that he does, right? And it's funny because I'm hearing myself sound like him. He's like, I like to break down different characters, and I like to break them down to at least 4 different levels. And it's Sam in Splinter Cell, his level is fear, and you're just like. What are the other 3? Never mind, you're awesome. Because, like, let's face it, that guy is kind of nonstop awesome in everything that he does. So I don't care whether he promised us 4 levels and gave us 1 level. I don't care. He's Michael Ironside. He's the coolest guy.
4 levels.
There's a story about, like, on Top Gun, he was walking around the deck of an aircraft carrier, and he was, like, in uniform, and he's like, God, I just don't even know how to play a military guy. I don't know what I'm doing. And while he was trying to figure out how the hell to play a military guy, a midshipman ran by and nearly, and then when he saw Michael Ironside in his uniform, he thought Michael Ironside was a ranking officer, so slowed down immediately, and Michael Ironside's like, hey, slow down. and the midshipman just freaked out and just walked very slowly past him, and then he's like, oh, I think I get this. Anyway,
that was it.
Just a little side story about Michael Ironside. But yeah, when it comes to the apprentice in Force Unleashed, we actually made an effort to say, his training, let's do a little Darth Maul story. This is how maybe Darth Maul would have been trained. This is so let's make him sound a little bit like Darth Maul when he's talking to Darth Vader, What is thy bidding, my master? And that type of stuff. So yeah, there was actually an effort to connect that character to Darth Maul in that way. I mean, there were some similarities there. And so it's funny that here years later I'm getting to put that practice into use.
Sam, the sequel to Force Unleashed was left kind of open-ended. And
Yes,
I was
sir.
wondering if you were ever aware of any plans or discussions to make a Force Unleashed 3.
Yeah, you got to talk to LucasArts about that, sir. That's their domain in terms of when they do projects and how they do projects. That's completely up to them. But the good news is that those two games were very successful, and everyone I certainly got a lot out of them, because it's funny. Those affected my career in a big way. I took meetings for series regular, jobs, for television shows, big jobs, and they'd ask me about Force Unleashed. Hell, look, I can tell you, I can't really say which ones, because I was actually cast in 1 or 2 of these and then couldn't do it, and it would be, frankly, not the nicest thing to say, hey, I was the original so-and-so on this show, I think it's lame.
Sure.
But some of these were really awesome jobs, and these guys were like either fans of Force Unleashed or just wanted to know more about it because everyone was talking about it. And in terms of my personal relationship, to Force Unleashed, I get asked about that every week, whether it's on the street by some fan or someone who played it, or by the press. I love the fact that I never would have dreamed that it would have been as helpful to my career as it's been. But it really, I'm tremendously lucky to have gotten that role, because that it really seemed to have resonated with a lot of fans.
Oh, absolutely. Is something that really resonated with me in particular. While I did love your role as Starkiller, the way you voiced the Emperor was, I mean, just such a surprise and just so amazing that I thought it was Ian McDiarmid at first.
Oh, that's very nice of you to say. I'm better at it now than I was back then. I was just learning it back then. But thank you. I appreciate that. I will tell you this: when I was recording in Montreal, I was because some of the Darth Maul stuff had to be done remotely because I was shooting Being Human at the time, and so we were doing this. I was in a studio with some very experienced guys running the session, and Dave Filoni was remote from the ranch. And during a break, after having worked for about an hour, the people that were running the studio said, "Hey, could you tell us who this Dave Filoni guy is?" And I'm like, "Oh, well, he's the showrunner of the Clone Wars." And they're like, "Look, we've run lots of sessions for lots of shows, animated or otherwise, and including movies, had big directors in here. We've never seen sessions run this efficiently. Or we've never heard a guy know exactly what he wants, like this Dave Filoni guy. Like, what's the deal?" And, and I remember just feeling proud because I'm like, yeah, the guy's uncommonly talented. He knows what he's doing. Wow. So
that's cool. Thank you for sharing that. That's very cool.
It's my hope because him and George work so well together, and he's really learned how George wants Star Wars made. I got to say, I really hope that George taps him to be the showrunner for the live action series because I think he could do it. In my experience, I mean, and by the way, I can be a pain in the ass on a set. I really can. If someone doesn't know their stuff, I take them to task. And I'm not quiet when something needs to be changed or something isn't up to snuff. So I can be hard on people. And again, only ever to make the project better. But I will take people to task. And so for me to say, hey, this guy could handle this, I truly mean that. Like, I've worked with a lot of incredible people, and Dave Filoni is one of the most talented out there.
It appeared there was quite a bit of chemistry between yourself and Clancy Brown in some of the behind-the-scenes videos we've seen. Just, some general thoughts on Clancy, what he's like in the studio, and what it's like to work with an actor of his caliber.
Well, he's brilliant. This is Clancy Brown. I mean, it was a big deal when I was doing the Mortis recordings, and Clancy came in to get autographs for his kid. That was actually a big deal for me because I'm a big fan of his work. I think he's just a nonstop brilliant actor. And so I remember when, because the Mortis trilogy aired, I think, right after the Night Sisters trilogy, and I saw Savage Opress, and I'm going into it. I'm like, oh, I'm playing the son. This is going to be so cool. He's such a cool character, and I'm all cocky. And then I see Savage Opress get introduced, and I'm like, oh, I have to come after this guy? Oh, no. This is such a cool character. Clancy's just, he's so great at this. Why do I have to air after this guy? He's really, really talented and really, really knows his stuff about Star Wars, too. He's a big fan, so he actually has a Rolodex of Star Wars information that he used. But more than anything, I mean, he's got this amazing vocal mechanism, but then just chops that are born of years and years and years of successful work. And I just admire the hell out of the guy. I mean, I got to be honest, when I get around him, I'm a little bit in awe of him because I just think he's extremely talented. So that's Clancy Brown.
Sam, how long have you been developing this this talent? Working with your voice and in creating so much range. And I mean, you're an on-screen actor. I mean, you've done a lot of on-screen work. You're in a hit show on Sci-Fi, Being Human, the American version of the series. When did this? I mean, have you always been kind of a mimic, or when did that start for you?
Well, I've always done voices to make my friends laugh. Everyone thought I was going to be like a comedic actor. They thought I was going to go do like SNL stuff when I was in theater school because that's all I really did well. I just kind of sucked at everything else. But then oddly, when I started working a few years later, it was just drama, and then eventually got, I think, better at that than, I mean, maybe I didn't suck when I was in theater school. I don't know. But I always thought I was just good at comedy. Mm-hmm. And So, but I always was, making strange voices. In terms of doing it professionally, I'm still very new to it. So I always feel a little bit off balance, like I don't really know what I'm doing. But, as far as my friends are concerned, I sit around and talk like this and do a Schwarzenegger impression to make them laugh. Let's try it. And it's go, come on, go, do it.
Oh, give me a get to the chopper.
Come on, get to the chopper, go. Yeah.
Wow.
I was at a party and a friend of mine.
Dang.
Inside, and this is a true story. I'm at this party and my friend goes, "Hey Sam, come here," and grabs him by the arm. Sam, I want you to meet Arnold. Arnold, this is Sam. Oh, great, nice to meet you. Hey, Sam does a great impression of you. Great, let's hear it. And I'm like, oh, great. So then I somehow talk my way out of it, but I'm standing in front of Arnold Schwarzenegger. Come on, do it. Come on. I'm here. Kill me. Come on, do it. So look, I've done it for fun. I just haven't done it professionally a lot. So I'm still learning. I still have a great deal to learn.
Wow.
The Palpatine thing. Look, my expertise is in front of the camera. That's where I feel, most centered. That's where I feel like I know what I'm doing. And, I've somehow become a dramatic actor. And
well, I have to tell you that I thought your performance as the son was an absolute masterclass in voice acting. Truly.
Yeah.
I thought it was unbelievable. Your ability to invoke all of those characters and it was that whole scene where you are Darth Maul, you are Dooku, you are Palpatine, I thought was just unbelievable.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. That feels great to hear. That more than anything isn't so much any kind of. Look, when I went to theater school, there was vocal training and there's all kinds of stuff that I am using. But more than anything, honestly, when you're a Star Wars fan for as long as I have and you've become an actor, you think a lot about how those performances are meant to work. So this is all just me trying out my theories, really. Just being like, I think it should, I think Star Wars performances are, in terms of the heroes, I think you should talk fast and talk loud. I think that works better because it's more of a 1940s thing. They're shot in master shots, so you need to fill the screen with personality. So kick it out there. And then when it comes to the villains, you can actually slow it down a little bit, but definitely make sure that you pack a lot of information in each sentence. And, these are all just theories that I've had for many years, which I hope I continue to get to try out on the Star Wars franchise.
Yeah. I think you guys have developed a pretty decent relationship. The possibility remains you'd come back as some other characters, too.
Oh, look, I'd love to do it. Anything that Dave wants me to do, I'll do. It's a lot of fun. I'm a huge Star Wars fan. It's one of my favorite things on the planet. So God, I don't take a better man than me to say no to some of these things.
Right on.
It's for Force Unleashed, it was one of those. It was the first time we were trying out theories about Star Wars acting, and it was, because we were trying to make something that was set closer to the original trilogy. I brought up a lot of points. I'm like, we got to pay attention to 1940s movies, guys. That's where it's coming from. That's the source material. In fact, let's watch Buster Crabbe in the Flash Gordon serials, and he's all, hey, I'm Flash Gordon. Yo, be our prisoner. And then he grabs someone by the chode and throws him down. You got to see these things. They're really. He does grab. He targets the chode. I'm not kidding you here. It's the dirtiest thing you've ever seen. He'll grab someone. Really, by the undercarriage, pick them up and throw them, and they didn't have stunt doubles back then, so he's really hurting people. Flash Gordon's kicking ass. You get the feeling that they're on the set, like these days you choreograph a fight scene. Back then they're like, all right, Buster, these three creature men come out and they attack you. So I watch it. You want me to kick their ass? Yeah. All right, action. And they're just like, come on, good work, Buster, you did it. But anyway, talking about those things, it's like these things are the things that informed George Lucas when he created Star Wars. So if you want to get the performances right, I think you need to study these things. And one of the things that I always was like, well, look, the dialogue is old school Saturday morning serial stuff. So, well, what did they do? Again, it's all shot in masters, and it's all about these big performances. Bigger performances work better than smaller performances in Star Wars. Being human. If I were to do like my Star Wars thing and being human, I'd be laughed off the screen. But when it comes to Star Wars, they're never really going in for those close-ups. They're never really punching into your face like that. You actually have to fill the space with a personality and with character traits and a sense of humor and a pace to the dialogue, because if you watch, what it is like George Lucas said in, people always made fun of George Lucas because all he would say to the actors in the original Star Wars movies was, oh, great, do it again, faster, more intense. And that was it, faster, more intense. But then watch Star Wars, and you're like, wow, dude, that's actually the perfect direction to take this entire movie, Can't get out the other way. Oh, cut off my escape route. Why you? Don't look at me that way. And it's this very quick banter between all the characters, and because of that, the dialogue, the audience never gets ahead of it. It's all very exciting stuff. Anyway, I didn't mean to. Look, I am I'm being extremely long-winded on this stuff, so please cut me off.
Never. You are going to stay on with us till next week. Because you are definitely a Star Wars fan, and there's no doubt about it. Have you had the opportunity to actually meet George and talk about your characters with him?
I met him once during the release of Force Unleashed, and we actually talked about this 1940s pace of the dialogue. We got into a conversation about that. So, yeah, cool. that was, and then he signed my Force Unleashed poster, so that was cool.
I love it. That's cool. And you were just at Skywalker Ranch. We saw a great video on StarWars.com. You were sitting in the archives next to a mannequin of Darth Maul. Was that your first time to visit the ranch in the archives? Did that happen when they had the big Darth Maul screening at ILM?
Well, Lucasfilm is very nice to people that are kind of in the family, and so I think around Force Unleashed 2, I somehow made the clearance I could just go and stay at the ranch sometimes, and so I'd been on the ranch several times before, but I'd never been in the archives. I mean, that place is it's locked down. It's impossible to get into. So when Tracy Canobio was gracious enough to say, "Hey, Sam, listen, I have a deal for you," I'm like, "Oh, what's the deal?" "Well, how would you like to stay at the ranch?" I'm like, "I always love to stay at the ranch." She's like, "All right, but in exchange, you're gonna have to do an interview for us." I'm like, "Sure, I'd love to." In the archives. I'm like, what? Okay, so you're basically saying to me, "Hey, Sam, we'll give you $100, but only if you allow us to give you $1,000." And so I got to go and check out the archives, and you can tell by my, if you watch that interview, I'm not doing a real good job of hiding my enthusiasm. I mean, it's you don't understand what I was being, because I had just walked in and the cameras were set up, and I didn't have a chance to really acquaint myself with my surroundings. So behind the cameras are Star Destroyers and X-Wings, and the Ark of the Covenant is right behind me, and there's all these thuggy guards and things from Temple of Doom, and this is film history. This is a big deal. This is stuff that people will wonder about, 50 years from now, 100 years from now, and I got to be near it, So for me, that wasn't the ideal time to conduct an interview, because I couldn't think straight. I was just surrounded with film lore. So,
did you get a chance to look around more after the interview?
Oh yes, okay. Yes, they showed me a lot of stuff. The archivists actually stayed after hours and showed me a lot of stuff, and that was just, you have no idea what it's like to be that close to it, and to be so close that you could touch it, but I didn't have the heart to touch anything. First of all, you're not supposed to, and secondly, right. I wouldn't want to. Yeah. It's cooler to not touch it, but I got right up into it. The 6-foot Star Destroyer model. The detail on that thing is just tremendous, and to be there and look at this and say, wow, this is what they shot to create that illusion that sparked my imagination when I was just a kid. It's really something else.
What was your first Star Wars memory as a kid, Sam?
My first Star Wars memory is, it comes between my father coming home and giving me a Stormtrooper action figure, which I knew what it was at the time, so I'd clearly seen Star Wars or was aware of it in some way, but I remember handling it and just thinking it was the coolest thing ever. And then also, he came home one day with a bootleg copy of maybe the last 25 minutes of the movie Star Wars. And it was on VHS, which was brand new at the time. No one, not everyone had VHS at the time. This is when VHS tapes were like $80.
Right. Oh yeah.
And that's in like $1979 or $1980, which is more like $160 now. But he came home with the last 25 minutes of Star Wars on tape with the promise that in the next few weeks he'd be able to get the whole movie on a bootleg tape, which is literally someone smuggling big, heavy video camera equipment into a theater and videotaping it. So I would watch that 25 minutes over and over again, watching this lightsaber fight between Obi-Wan and Darth Vader and then, some of the end battle. And then when I finally got the whole movie, that was just a miracle because it's like we had Star Wars in our house. And then I guess the next big momentous memory that I have is going to see Return of the Jedi in the theater. And I was still
What theater?
I was okay. This is interesting. It was a theater called Old Orchard.
Sure, in Skokie.
Yes, with those strange statues on the wall.
Yeah,
and it was there that I saw Return of the Jedi for the first time, being totally familiar with the characters, the situations, and being just old enough to actually make some pretty adult conclusions about what was happening in that film. When the Rebel cruisers started getting blown up, I was horribly demoralized because even at maybe I was 5 or 6 years old or something like that. I was devastated because I'm like, there are thousands of good guys aboard those ships and they're all dying, So I was like, we're losing. This is bad. I remember being creeped out as hell when Obi-Wan was saying, "Here's a ball machine now, the man, twisted and evil." And I was just like, oh no. And it really put into question Luke's little crusade. I was like, this is not, Obi-Wan's saying it's not a good idea to try to save this guy. He's saying that he's going to hurt you if you do. This is not good, and just really understood what the Emperor represented. And for me, the Ewoks were a welcome relief from all that darkness,
Oh, absolutely.
As
You're
a
right.
kid,
Yes.
I needed that.
Yes.
I really needed the release route because without the Ewoks, it's a pretty dark film. You have Luke showing up on the Death Star saying, "Hey, guess what? We all die. We're all going to die, including me." Like, what?
Yeah.
Luke choking out pig guards and all the stuff that's happening, including, again, Obi-Wan Kenobi. People don't really give Obi-Wan credit for this move. But Obi-Wan and Luke have a conversation that goes something like this. Luke goes, "Hey, I can't do this. I'm not cool with this plan." And Obi-Wan's like, "Well, kill him though." And he's like, "But what if we saved him? Can we bring him back?" And Obi-Wan's like, "No, we can't. Kill him. It's a bad idea. This guy's like rotten to the core. You have to take him out." He's saying it politely, but he's saying, "Kill him. Your plan is bad." Me and Yoda are saying, "Kill him." And the most wonderful thing about the story of Luke Skywalker is that he gets to a point where he's enough of a man to reject what everyone is telling him, the good guys and the bad guys. And he goes, "No, it feels right to save this guy. That's what I'm going to do. Regardless of the Emperor says I should do this, Yoda and Obi-Wan say I should do this, I'm going to do something that none of them have thought of. I'm going to save him."
The third way, yes, he comes up with it. That's very cool. It's something that people haven't brought up here before.
That he couldn't have done in the second or the first movie, but he's ready to do it in the third.
Yeah, and Sam, you and I, we share. We were born the same year, so I was the same age as you were exactly when we saw Return of the Jedi in the theater, and it was probably one of the most profound experiences of my childhood, no doubt.
Seriously. Yeah.
And it's interesting how, as young as we were, we like you say, we went into it knowing all the characters, knowing the situations, knowing what was at stake.
Yeah.
I don't think we'll ever see anything quite like it. But
well, what's funny is I had there's an actor named Dave Gentoli, and he'd never seen any Star Wars movies. He's the star of the show Grimm.
Huh.
And he'd never seen any Star Wars movies. So me and my buddy Ken Mitchell, we're like, all right, well, it's time. We had a specified amount of time. Like we only had a few days because I had to go off and shoot Being Human, and different people were doing different jobs. So we decided, we're like, well, okay, well, we have to, if we have a limited amount of time, we show them the original Star Wars trilogy, obviously, because, for my money, no movie sets up Star Wars better than Star Wars. No movie actually hands you a lightsaber and lets you swing it around before you fight someone with it. No movie explains the Force so eloquently as Alec Guinness does. No movie actually takes you from 0 to 60 the way that movie does. So it really does need to be watched first. So then and then also if you go to Empire after that, you get to maintain all the surprise of Yoda and Darth Vader's big spoiler, that whole thing of who Darth Vader really is, which blew Dave Gentoli's mind. He didn't see that coming, which was a miracle for us, because who doesn't know this? But he didn't. And so he was shocked. And this is a 31-year-old guy, right?
You had a real Star Wars virgin there.
Absolutely. So then, after that, we're like, we have an opportunity to strike a blow for science here. So we're like, we have an extra day. Let's show him Revenge of the Sith now. So we're like, Dave, you curious about, this whole backstory? And he's like, yeah. I'm like, all right. So we put on Revenge of the Sith. And what was awesome about that is that he actually had doubts. He said, well, is Vader lying? I mean, I think he's not, but could it be that someone else becomes this Darth Vader guy? And he goes, what did the Yoda mean by that whole there is another thing? What the hell was he talking about? What's going on here? He had all these questions. And so then, as the movie goes on, we would stop the movie every now and then, and Dave would share his thoughts. And he'd go, I don't know, I think maybe Anakin's a good guy. And then he beheads Dooku, and he's like, okay, I don't know. I have a bad feeling about this guy. And,
right.
And then by the end of it, he's like, okay, yeah, he's Darth Vader. And it wasn't, he could see that he was kind of bummed out by the fact. And then, but one of the most wonderful reveals was that, as soon as that droid goes, she's carrying twins. Dave, it's like, pause, what, pause, wait, pause. And he's freaking out, and he's like, there is another? And he's looking at me and Ken, and we're like, yeah, I don't know what's happening. And by the way, in the meantime, you have to understand, he's been through all this stuff with the Emperor and all these terrible things, and the bad guys are just kicking ass. So now there's this ray of hope, and he's like, there is another? What's going on? And then the scene is playing out with the births of the twins. And he's, Luke comes out, and he's like, it's Luke. It's like, is it Leia? Leia? And he just freaks out. He just had this great, just this exclamation like, yes, holy shit. And he's freaking out, and he's trying to wrap his brain about what this means to Star Wars now that he's discovered that Luke Skywalker has a twin sister, and it was Leia. So then we go to Return of the Jedi, and all of the characters are lovingly reintroduced one by one, brought back into the story. And when you see Luke, he's dressed like his father. And, so Dave's like, oh no, this isn't good, because he just, Luke has been through some dark times now, and he's choking out the Gamorrean guards, and Dave's like, oh no, this is what's going to happen here. Because now there's another that could take up the mantle of Jedi Knight, so maybe Luke's going to fail. And then, the scene with Obi-Wan happens, where he goes, the other is his sister. And Dave's watching it. And then he goes, whoa, wait a second. Pause. Is this how you guys found out? And we're like, yeah. And he's like, that's so lame. And so he's like, no, my way is so much better. He's like, mine was really dramatic, and it was a story point. And this is just some guy telling you. And I'm like, no. We accepted it at the time.
That's right.
And so when Yoda's saying, don't, beware the Emperor, Gentoli's like, yeah, you'd better look out for that guy, and because he had this whole history with them. And then finally, the big thing at the end was that, Luke was being killed by that lightning. And Dave, the last time he'd seen the lightning was when Anakin screws up. So he's just sitting there going, oh, God, not again. Come on. And he literally was rooting for the guys, like, come on, snap out of it. Just do something. Come on. So then when Vader makes the move toward the Emperor, it was a huge moment for Dave. And, we kind of converted him into a Star Wars fan. And this is a guy who's 31. So he is having an adult reaction to all these movies.
Yeah.
And he said, he's like, for my money, Return of the Jedi must be watched after Revenge of the Sith. He's like, it's a much better movie if you've seen Revenge of the Sith right before it.
Pretty interesting. There's been a lot of conversation online, especially now that the Blu-ray complete saga has been released, as to what is the preferred order in watching these films. And of course, George always wants everyone to watch them 1 through 6. Old school fans want to watch the first trilogy and then the prequels. But we're hearing about all these alternate orders. And oftentimes it's 4, 5, then the prequels, then Return of the Jedi, or a variation.
Right. Yeah, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 6. That 6 wraps it all up.
So that way you still get the reveal,
yes.
The I am your father reveal, but
yes.
And then you can really sink your teeth into the backstory before it all gets resolved.
Well, guys, how did Godfather do it? They introduce you to Don Corleone, they introduce you to the family, and then in the next movie, you've now framed it with a flashback story being framed by what's happening in modern day.
Absolutely.
So
yeah.
You do it the Godfather way. You do 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 6.
Yeah.
That's how you do it. In fact, there's a better way to do it. Clone Wars, then 4, 5, then 1, 2, 3, 6. Because if the kids watch Clone Wars first, you know, a young Jedi named Darth Vader, who was a pupil of mine before he turned to evil, hunted down and destroyed the Jedi Knights. He betrayed and murdered your father. That makes kids hate Darth Vader with a passion because Anakin is their hero, because they watched the cartoon.
Right.
And then when they go to 5 and learn that Vader is the father, they're mind blown, devastated, but also hugely intrigued. And then they get to return to that universe that they're aware of, the 1, 2, 3, universe. And they know everything about General Grievous and Dooku and all those characters, and then you get to go to 6 and you conclude it. But the bottom line is you can't avoid the order with which the movies have been seen, because the Tusken Raiders in, say, Episode 1 are a hilarious joke, but they're a joke. In Episode 4, they're terrifying.
Yeah.
The Jawas in Episode 4 are mysterious. The Jawas in Episode 1 are kind of everywhere. You're like, oh, it's those guys. No, but when you watch Episode 4, you see these little dudes, and you're like, what are these guys? Who are these people? You can't avoid that order. You really can't.
Just to think of the whole generation of kids out there who have only watched the Clone Wars, and they only understand Anakin as the do no wrong hero.
Yeah.
They're in for a big shocker. Filoni told us once that they were showing some kids some pictures of Clone Wars characters, and they'd show Padme, and the kid would say, good guy. They would show Captain Rex, and the kid would say, good guy. They'd show Ahsoka, good guy. They'd show Palpatine, and the kid would say, good guy.
Yeah, of course. I actually have made that argument. There's, a few things that come up every now and then where, it tips Palpatine's hand a little bit. And I keep urging Dave, I'm like, don't do it. The kids haven't made that connection yet. That happens. That's a connection that the kids will make when they see the movies. But not yet. The Clone Wars that's not the Clone Wars job. The Clone Wars job is to portray Palpatine as the good guy.
Yeah,
absolutely. And I think they've been doing a pretty good job, because we've seen very few references to Palpatine as he's working behind the scenes, plotting his ultimate betrayal of the Republic to overthrow it as the Emperor. We've seen very little of it. And some of us have complained about that, Jason. But when you have, but Sam, when you put it that way, it really does make a lot of sense.
It's not the job of, I don't think it's the job of the Clone Wars show to tip off that story point, especially when you consider that kids are watching this first. They're being acclimated to this world through this awesome animated series. So an animated series that is now, by the way, like rivaling the darkness of the movies.
No doubt.
But an animated series that they are starting with, and and we have to remember that the big reveal for Palpatine is in Episode 3. That's when it happens.
Well, that's awesome, Sam, and we're also looking forward to hearing more from you and seeing more from you on the Clone Wars as Darth Maul and who knows who else. And for me, you're the local boy done good, Glenview, Illinois. Fantastic, and I'm just very happy for all of your successes, be it Star Wars, Being Human, Crash Tones, you name it.
Oh, thank you very much. And for fans out there, the Maul stuff coming up is so great. I mean, remember that we're thinking of this as a story that continues and has a long arc. So you've only seen the first 40 minutes of this story, and there's a lot more to come that we've already recorded that I just love. I mean, Filoni, all those guys, they're doing such great work, and I'm so grateful that I have an opportunity to contribute.
Well, we're lucky to have you. Can't wait to see more of Darth Maul in season 5 and beyond of the Clone Wars. Sam Witwer, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, guys. Thank you very, very much.
You're welcome. Thanks, Sam.
See ya.